What drives a man from obscurity to lead one of the deadliest regimes in history? This is the story of Adolf Hitler, the dictator who plunged the world into chaos. History is often shaped by individuals who rise from seemingly unremarkable beginnings to wield extraordinary power. Adolf Hitler, the man who would plunge the world into the deadliest conflict in human history, was one such individual. His journey from an obscure Austrian village to the pinnacle of power in Germany is a chilling tale of ambition, resentment, and the exploitation of fear and chaos. Born in 1889, Adolf Hitler's early life was marked by instability and conflict. His father, Alois, was a strict and authoritarian customs official, prone to outbursts of anger. Their relationship was fraught with tension, leaving young Adolf feeling both resentful and insecure. His mother, Clara, provided a source of comfort and affection, but her death from cancer when Hitler was just 18 devastated him. After his mother's death, Hitler drifted to Vienna, the capital of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, with dreams of becoming an artist. He envisioned himself as a great painter, but his aspirations were met with rejection. Twice denied admission to the Vienna Academy of Fine Arts, he was left to eke out a meager existence selling postcards and paintings. Vienna, a vibrant melting pot of cultures and ethnicities, proved to be a formative influence on Hitler, though not in the way he had hoped. He developed a deep resentment towards the city's cosmopolitanism, its diverse population, and its thriving Jewish community. He embraced a crude form of social Darwinism, seeing life as a struggle between races, with the strong destined to dominate the weak. These prejudices, nurtured in the seedy underbelly of Vienna, would later form the core of his twisted ideology. The outbreak of World War I in 1914 provided Hitler with a sense of purpose and belonging he had long craved. He volunteered for the German army, eager to prove his worth and fight for a cause he believed in. He served with distinction, earning the Iron Cross for bravery. The war, however, also left an indelible mark on him. He witnessed the horrors of trench warfare, the camaraderie of soldiers, and the bitterness of defeat. Germany's humiliating defeat in 1918 and the harsh terms of the Treaty of Versailles fueled Hitler's resentment and his belief that Germany had been betrayed by its own leaders and by Jews and Marxists. He saw the Weimar Republic, the fragile democracy that emerged from the ashes of the German Empire, as weak and incapable of restoring Germany to its former glory. These experiences, his troubled childhood, his failed artistic ambitions, his time in Vienna, and his experiences in World War I shaped Hitler's worldview and laid the foundation for his rise to power. Understanding these formative years is crucial to understanding the man who would become the architect of one of the darkest chapters in human history. The rise of Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party is a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked extremism, the seductive power of propaganda, and the fragility of democracy. It is a story that must be told and retold to ensure that such horrors are never repeated. In the years following World War I, a defeated and humiliated Germany grappled with economic chaos and political instability. It was in this fertile ground of discontent that Adolf Hitler and his Nazi Party would sow the seeds of their poisonous ideology, setting the stage for their rise to power. Defeat in the Great War left Germany a shattered nation. Humiliated by the Treaty of Versailles, burdened by crippling war reparations, and plagued by economic instability, the Weimar Republic struggled to maintain order. This atmosphere of chaos and discontent created fertile ground for extremist ideologies to take root and flourish. In the midst of this turmoil, a small political party with a radical agenda began to gain traction. The National Socialist German Workers' Party, or Nazi Party, led by the charismatic and fiercely nationalistic Adolf Hitler, offered a seductive message of hope and restoration. Hitler, a skilled orator with a mesmerizing presence, tapped into the deep-seated anger and resentment of the German people. He blamed the Weimar Republic, communists, and Jews for Germany's woes, promising to restore the nation to its former glory. Hitler and the Nazis were masters of propaganda. They skillfully exploited the new mass media of radio and film to disseminate their message and create a cult of personality around Hitler. They organized mass rallies, complete with stirring music, dramatic lighting, and choreographed displays of loyalty, creating a spectacle that captivated and enthralled audiences. In November 1923, emboldened by their growing popularity, Hitler and the Nazis attempted to seize power in Munich in what became known as the Beer Hall Putsch. The coup failed, and Hitler was arrested and imprisoned for treason. However, his imprisonment proved to be a turning point. While incarcerated, Hitler wrote Mein Kampf, My Struggle, a rambling and vitriolic autobiography outlining his political ideology and his vision for Germany. The book became a bestseller, further spreading his ideas and solidifying his image as a powerful leader. Upon his release from prison in 1924, Hitler adopted a new strategy. He realized that seizing power through force was not feasible. Instead, he focused on building the Nazi Party's strength through legal means, participating in elections, and exploiting the democratic process to his advantage. The Nazis' rise was further fueled by the Great Depression, which hit Germany particularly hard. Unemployment soared, and millions were plunged into poverty. In this atmosphere of despair, the Nazis' promises of economic recovery and national revival resonated with a growing number of Germans. Hitler proved to be a shrewd political operator. He forged alliances with powerful industrialists and conservative politicians, gaining their support and financial backing. He presented himself as a strong leader who could restore order and stability, appealing to those who feared the rise of communism. In 1933, a fire broke out in the Reichstag building, the seat of the German parliament. The Nazis blamed the communists for the fire, using the incident to create a climate of fear and justify the suppression of their political opponents. Exploiting the chaos, Hitler persuaded President Paul von Hindenburg to pass the Enabling Act, which granted him dictatorial powers. With this act, the Weimar Republic effectively came to an end, and Hitler's grip on power was solidified. But how did Hitler, a man with a criminal record, a radical ideology, and a history of violence, ultimately manage to seize control of a nation and transform it into a totalitarian state? The answer lies in a complex web of factors: the exploitation of economic hardship, the manipulation of fear and resentment, the masterful use of propaganda, and the strategic maneuvering within the political system. With the reins of power firmly in his grasp, Hitler wasted no time in consolidating his control and implementing his vision for a new German Reich, a vision that would have devastating consequences for the world. The Reichstag fire, on the night of February 27, 1933, was a pivotal moment in Hitler's rise to absolute power. While the exact cause of the fire remains debated to this day, the Nazis seized upon the event, blaming communist agitators and using it to justify a sweeping crackdown on their political opponents. Within hours of the fire, Hitler persuaded President Hindenburg to issue the Reichstag Fire Decree. This emergency decree suspended basic civil liberties, including freedom of speech, assembly, and the press. It also allowed for warrantless arrests and indefinite detention without trial. The Nazis used the decree to unleash a wave of terror against their enemies. Communists, socialists, and other political opponents were arrested en masse. Early concentration camps, like Dachau, were established to hold these enemies of the state. The fire, whether accidental or deliberately set, provided the pretext for Hitler to eliminate opposition and consolidate his control. Just weeks after the fire, with the political opposition decimated and the public gripped by fear. Hitler pushed through the Enabling Act. This law effectively granted him dictatorial powers, allowing him to enact laws without parliamentary approval. The Reichstag, now purged of its opposition, voted overwhelmingly in favor of the act, effectively signing away its own power. With the Enabling Act in place, Hitler moved swiftly to dismantle the remaining vestiges of democracy and establish a one-party dictatorship. This process, known as Gleichschaltung or coordination, brought all aspects of German life under Nazi control. Trade unions were abolished, political parties were banned, and the judiciary was brought to heel. The Nazis infiltrated every facet of society: schools, universities, the media, the arts, even leisure organizations. Children were indoctrinated with Nazi ideology through the Hitler Youth and the League of German Girls. Professionals, from doctors and lawyers to teachers and artists, were forced to join Nazi-controlled organizations. But the consolidation of power was not without its internal struggles. The Sturmabteilung, SA, the Nazi Party's paramilitary wing, led by Ernst Röhm, had grown increasingly powerful and restless. Röhm, a radical revolutionary, envisioned a second revolution that would sweep away the old order and establish a socialist state. This vision clashed with Hitler's desire to maintain the support of the army and conservative elites. In June 1934, Hitler orchestrated the Night of the Long Knives, a brutal purge of the SA leadership. Röhm and hundreds of other perceived threats were arrested and executed. This ruthless act eliminated a potential rival and consolidated Hitler's control over the Nazi Party and the state apparatus. It's a chilling irony that many of those who helped Hitler rise to power ultimately became victims of his regime. Early supporters, like Gregor Strasser and Kurt von Schleicher, who believed they could control Hitler and use him for their own purposes, were ruthlessly eliminated once they were perceived as a threat. This serves as a stark reminder of the dangers of compromising with extremism and the unpredictable nature of totalitarian regimes. With all opposition crushed and his power absolute, Hitler turned his attention to fulfilling his ultimate ambition: the creation of a greater German Reich that would dominate Europe and realize his vision of Aryan supremacy. This ambition would plunge the world into the abyss of World War II. With absolute power secured, Hitler set about transforming Germany into a totalitarian state, a regime where every aspect of life was controlled and subordinated to the will of the Nazi Party. This Third Reich, as it was called, was built on the twin pillars of racial purity and national expansion. Domestically, Hitler implemented policies designed to create a racially pure and obedient society. The Nuremberg laws stripped Jews of their citizenship and basic rights, paving the way for systematic persecution. Political opponents, intellectuals, and artists who dared to dissent were silenced or imprisoned. The Gestapo, the secret police, and the SS, Hitler's elite guard, enforced conformity through surveillance, intimidation, and violence. But Hitler's ambitions extended far beyond Germany's borders. He envisioned a vast German empire stretching across Eastern Europe, providing Lebensraum, living space, for the Aryan race. This expansionist ideology, rooted in a twisted interpretation of social Darwinism, fueled his aggressive foreign policy. Hitler embarked on a massive rearmament program, violating the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. He rebuilt the German army, air force, and navy, preparing for the war of conquest he believed was necessary to secure Germany's destiny. His first moves were calculated and opportunistic. In 1936, he remilitarized the Rhineland, a demilitarized zone bordering France. Then, in 1938, he annexed Austria, his native land, into the German Reich. Emboldened by these successes and the lack of effective resistance from the Western powers, Hitler turned his attention to Czechoslovakia. The Sudetenland, a region of Czechoslovakia with a large German population, became the focus of his next territorial demand. In September 1938, at the Munich Conference, British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain and French Premier Édouard Daladier, in a desperate attempt to avoid war, appeased Hitler by allowing him to annex the Sudetenland. This act of appeasement, while intended to preserve peace, only emboldened Hitler further. It also demonstrated the dangerous fallacy of believing that concessions to a dictator could satisfy his appetite for conquest. As Winston Churchill, a lone voice of opposition, famously declared, Britain and France had to choose between war and dishonor. They chose dishonor. They will have war. Less than a year after the Munich Agreement, Hitler shatters the fragile peace. On September 1, 1939, German forces invaded Poland, marking the beginning of World War II. Imagine the fear and uncertainty gripping Europe as Hitler's ambitions became clear. The continent, still scarred by the horrors of the First World War, was once again plunged into the abyss of conflict. Millions of lives would be lost, and the world would be forever changed. The invasion of Poland marked a turning point in history. The world was now at war with a ruthless regime determined to impose its will through force and terror. The years that followed would witness unimaginable brutality and suffering, but also acts of extraordinary courage and resilience. Hitler's invasion of Poland ignited a global conflict that would engulf the world in flames. World War II, a war of unprecedented scale and brutality, pitted the Axis powers, led by Germany, Italy, and Japan, against the Allied forces, led by Great Britain, the United States, and the Soviet Union. The war raged across continents, from the beaches of Normandy to the deserts of North Africa, from the frozen plains of Russia to the jungles of the Pacific. It was a war of attrition, a clash of ideologies, and a struggle for survival. Millions of soldiers and civilians perished in the fighting, victims of bombs, bullets, and the horrors of modern warfare. But amidst the chaos and carnage of war, a darker, more sinister chapter was unfolding. The Holocaust, the systematic persecution and murder of millions of Jews, Roma, and other groups deemed undesirable by the Nazis, stands as one of the most horrific crimes in human history. Fueled by a twisted ideology of racial purity, the Nazis implemented a plan to eliminate the Jewish population of Europe. Jews were stripped of their rights, their property, and their dignity. They were forced into ghettos, segregated from the rest of society, and subjected to starvation and disease. Then came the deportations. Millions of Jews were rounded up and transported to concentration camps, vast complexes designed for forced labor and extermination. At these camps, prisoners were subjected to unimaginable cruelty, starvation, torture, medical experimentation, and mass murder. The Nazis developed efficient methods of killing on an industrial scale. Gas chambers, disguised as showers, were used to murder millions of innocent people. Their bodies were then burned in crematoria or dumped into mass graves. But even in the face of unimaginable horror, there were acts of resistance and defiance. Jewish partisans fought back against the Nazis in ghettos and forests. Individuals risked their lives to hide Jews from the authorities. And even within the camps, prisoners found ways to resist, to maintain their humanity, and to keep hope alive. There were also remarkable stories of rescue and compassion. Individuals like Oskar Schindler, a German businessman, and Raoul Wallenberg, a Swedish diplomat, used their influence and resources to save thousands of Jews from certain death. These stories, often overshadowed by the overwhelming tragedy of the Holocaust, remind us of the capacity for good even in the darkest of times. How could the world stand by and allow such atrocities to happen? How could governments, institutions, and individuals remain silent in the face of such evil? These are questions we must grapple with, even today. Share your thoughts in the comments, and let's continue the conversation about the importance of remembering the Holocaust and preventing future genocides. The tide of the war began to turn. The Allied victory at Stalingrad in 1943 marked a crucial turning point on the Eastern Front. In the West, the D-Day landings in Normandy in 1944 opened a second front, squeezing Nazi Germany from both sides. The once invincible Wehrmacht was now on the retreat, its forces depleted and its resources dwindling. As the Allied armies closed in on Berlin, the heart of the Third Reich, Hitler's grip on reality loosened. He retreated to his underground bunker, a concrete labyrinth beneath the Chancellery, where he remained isolated from the devastation unfolding above. Surrounded by a dwindling circle of loyalists, he refused to acknowledge defeat, clinging to delusional fantasies of a final victory. In the bunker, the atmosphere was one of fear, paranoia, and desperation. Hitler, his health deteriorating, railed against his generals, blaming them for the impending defeat. He issued absurd orders, demanding counteroffensives that were impossible to execute. He clung to the hope of miracle weapons that never materialized. In the final days, with the Red Army closing in, Hitler married his longtime mistress, Eva Braun. He dictated his last will and testament, a document filled with bitterness and self-justification. He blamed the Jews for the war and declared that the German people, having failed him, deserved their fate. On April 30th, 1945, with Soviet troops just blocks away, Hitler and Eva Braun committed suicide. Their bodies were hastily cremated in the Chancellery Garden, a final act of defiance and an attempt to deny the enemy the satisfaction of capturing him. With Hitler's death, the Third Reich crumbled. On May 8, 1945, Germany unconditionally surrendered, marking the end of the war in Europe. The world rejoiced, but the cost of victory had been immense. Millions lay dallased, cities were reduced to rubble, and an entire continent lay in ruins. Hitler's downfall was as dramatic and catastrophic as his rise to power. The man who had dreamed of conquering Europe ended his life hiding in a bunker, defeated and reviled. His ambitions, fueled by hatred and delusion, led to his own destruction and the devastation of his nation. The legacy of Hitler and the Third Reich serves as a chilling reminder of the dangers of unchecked power, the seductive allure of extremism, and the devastating consequences of hatred and intolerance. It is a legacy that continues to haunt us today, urging us to remain vigilant against the forces of darkness that can rise again if we fail to learn from the past. In the aftermath of the war, the world grappled with the consequences of Hitler's actions. The Nuremberg trials, held to prosecute Nazi war criminals, exposed the horrors of the regime and sought to hold its leaders accountable for their crimes. However, the legacy of hatred and prejudice sown by the Nazis continues to haunt us today. If you found this documentary insightful, please consider subscribing to our channel for more explorations of history's most pivotal moments.